Chapter 5, Mishnah 7. This Mishnah discusses whether a watering trowel may be used for mechatas. This is a stone attached to the ground that was hollowed out. A nearby spring flows directly into the trowel through a hole drilled into its side, filling it with water. Animals then drink from it. Regarding a trowel carved in a rock attached to the ground, we may not fill it with spring water to use for mechatas, and we may not sanctify mechatas in it, and we may not sprinkle mechatas from it, because this trowel is not considered a kli. Rather, it is regarded as a pit in the ground. The Mishnah teaches two more laws that stem from the fact that this trowel is not considered a kli. The first law relates to tumas ohel. And if the trowel is under the same ohel as a corpse, it does not need a sealed cover to prevent tuma from entering it. Although a kli cannot protect its contents from becoming tameh from tumas ohel unless the kli has a cover sealed onto it, a pit in the ground protects its contents from tumas ohel as long as the pit is covered. Its cover does not need to be sealed on. Since this trowel is considered a pit, not a kli, it protects its contents even if its cover is not sealed on. The second law involves the laws of mikveh. A mikveh must contain at least 40 sa of rainwater that collected in the ground without ever being in a kli. Water that was held in a kli is called she'uven water, drawn water, which is invalid for a mikveh. If it is added to a mikveh, it can disqualify the mikveh. However, only water that was held in a kli is considered she'uven water. And water from this trowel does not disqualify a mikveh. Since a trowel carved out of rock is not considered a kli, the water it holds is not considered she'uven water, and does not qualify a mikveh into which it is added. The Mishnah now discusses a trowel that was carved into a rock that is not connected to the ground. If a trowel was formed as a utensil unattached to the ground, that is, it was carved into a rock that was not connected to the ground, even if someone later attached it to the ground with lime, it is considered a kli. Therefore, we may fill it with spring water to use for mechatas, and we may sanctify mechatas in it, and we may sprinkle mechatas from it. And if the trowel is under the same ohel as a corpse, it needs a sealed cover to prevent tuma from entering it, and water from the trowel disqualifies a mikveh. The mikveh continues to discuss a trowel that had been formed out of a detached rock, and thus qualifies as a kli. If the trowel developed a hole on the bottom, even if someone plugged it with a rag to prevent water from leaking out, the water inside the trowel is invalid for mechatas, because the water is not encircled by a kli, i.e., the trowel that surrounds the water is no longer classified as a kli. Since the trowel has a hole, it is no longer able to hold water, and thus it loses its status as a kli. However, if the trowel developed a hole on its side and someone plugged it with a rag, the water inside it is valid for mechatas, since it is encircled by a kli, i.e., the trowel that surrounds the water is still classified as a kli because it can still hold some water below the level of the hole. More laws about a trowel that was formed out of a detached rock, which is considered a kli. If one made a rim of clay on the mouth of the trowel, and the water went there, that is, as water entered the trowel from the spring, the water level rose until it reached the level of the rim. The water at the level of the rim is invalid for mechatas. Since such a rim is usually not attached firmly to the trowel, it is not considered part of the trowel. Thus, the water at the level of the rim is not in a kli and is invalid for mechatas. However, if the rim was attached to the trowel firmly enough that it will be carried with the trowel, i.e., the rim will not fall off when the trowel is moved from place to place, the water at the rim is valid for mechatas. In such a case, the rim is considered part of the trowel, and thus the water at the level of the rim is inside a kli.